Welcome to this podcast. I call it Design Talk. I'm Mike,
I call it the thing I have to do.
and we're doing the Super Moves one. This took forever.
Yeah, this one, it took us like 4 weeks of actual work, but we lost a week to a non-starter.
Two different non-starters.
Two different non-starters. That is true.
There was one. We mentioned this in the comments. If you caught our one random comment, we were originally going to do a quick hitter episode on desert levels, which we might do in the future.
We might do in the future, but right now it's like the writing wasn't coming together.
Yeah, we were trying to get one out the door as fast as possible, and we were like, okay, we could do that, and then some things fell through that made it not necessary to do a very fast one. So we were like, all right, we'll just put that on the back burner. Then we switched. We wanted to do an RPG episode, like an RPG topic again. And so we spent about 3 days on doing an RPG classes episode.
And we found another video that essentially would have said the same thing.
Yeah, so I started writing stuff. I was like, okay, let's make this handful of points. And then you found, I think, an Architect of Games video from like a year ago that's like fairly close. And then I looked at it and I was like, oh man, that's the point I was going to make. Oh, that's a point I was going to make. Oh, there's too many points.
Yeah, if we really tried, we could probably find our own spin, but...
So that led to... skip ahead to last night, so like a month later, I think we came up with a different angle on the RPG classes video that we could do. I went looking around a little bit for equivalent topics of the one that we're...
And nothing is super noteworthy, and also the topic is broad in a way that we could do our own examples.
Yeah, there's an extra credits video that's like sort of leaning that way, but we could do it
it's
differently.
Also very old.
Yeah,
that's another factor.
It's fine. I think we can definitely do that better than we could try to do the original thing, which was just going to be the same video as the Architect of Games video. So anyway, backtrack to the start of this thing. So yeah, we were like 3 days in, I think, on writing stuff, and then you sent me the link. And then I was like, oh no, this is the same thing. We gotta blow it up and start over. And then you were like, it's over.
It's so over.
It's so over.
Yeah, no, I was pretty bummed about that.
And then we just sat down at like 5 p.m. I was like, okay, let's think of another one. And then it only took, every time we have this, it only takes like 20 minutes to come up with a good episode, if not 5 good episodes.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, we'll start like a brainstorming session in kind of a dour mood, and then we'll talk a little bit, and then we'll
here we go.
We'll find an idea almost immediately.
Hell,
every yesterday time. We had that.
Yeah, we had a different one to revive the RPG episode. And we don't even need necessarily to find one at the time because we got a backlog of stuff.
Yeah.
But boy, it's a good... I sometimes worry that, we're closing in on 100 episodes, that we're going to run out of like sensible topics that we can talk about. Not that there would be no topics, but
find ways to spice things up.
Well, that would come from us coming from a place of knowing what we're talking about. Like, we're not going to go into like...
We're not going to go deep into fighting games.
Yeah,
this is about as deep as we went.
Yeah, I felt a little bit out of my depth to talk about some of the fighting game stuff, balance wise.
Yeah,
which is why there isn't more emphasis on the fighting game side.
There was also that's also partially the reason why this episode took longer, because we had a larger fighting game segment.
Yeah,
in this episode,
we had to like double check and try to make sure that we weren't just immediately saying just wrong stuff in the video.
Like, the video was very, like, I guess, top heavy in that sense, where we just had a huge segment where we were just going over 5 different fighting games, and like the biggest thing that caused this episode to just take so long was just figuring out how we organized all our topics, because it was an absolute mess.
Yeah, so this started off, you were playing a bunch of F-Zero 99, and we're talking about like, hey, the Skyway system can kind of be a super move. And that was sort of the branching off. Because before that, it was just like, okay, super moves, but then it's like only fighting games. Maybe.
Yeah, I had to convince you that it was more than fighting games because super moves are a very universal concept.
Yeah, and then so that led to, hey, look at me looking at F-Zero 99 and also seeing that, like, hey, you could construct an episode out of super moves that are just like the most powerful kinds of moves in whatever game they're in.
Yeah, like, a ton of games have like meter mechanics or like, building up resources for a big move like that.
Yeah. And then just being like, okay, how do you go and balance these sorts of moves? And then we found all kinds of examples of like, hey, here's a super move that goes poorly, like the Mario Tennis one, where it's just like, yeah, it's a super and it wrecks the game.
Yeah, it's just kind of given to you.
And it's like, that's the sort of pivot point of the episode. It's like, how do you make it so you don't fall into the super move is the only important part of the move set?
Yeah, it's like a whole bunch of different issues. Like, okay, when are super moves overdone? When do they become a dominant strategy? When do they succumb to like spectacle creep?
Mm-hmm.
Like early on, this didn't make it in, but I had like a Sonic Frontiers segment where essentially most of the moves you're using are presented as if they're super moves. Mm-hmm. But that just ends up making all the moves just feel the same, and also it just hurts the pacing of combat. That segment didn't make it in, but it sort of got replaced by the Kingdom Hearts 3 segment, which actually came in super late.
Yeah, the 3 did, not 2. 2 was around earlier.
Yeah, 2 had been around for a while, at least since the start of us making the Transformation Super segment.
Yeah, towards the very end, this episode was like 26 minutes long or something now?
Yeah.
It was about 22 minutes long, and we had not talked at all about just the spectacle and the visual aspect of a super move.
Yeah, that is just one of those things that was just falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I was like, we have to say something about the supers looking real good, and the Kingdom Hearts 3, those are very visually like emphasized. Like it is trying to wow you with visuals.
Yeah. The Splatoon segment was also a very late one as well. That was in the same batch of like writing as the Kingdom Hearts 3 segment.
Yeah. So back in the sort of first days of writing the script on this, we kind of were like, okay, super moves. Let's get a variety in here. We know we want to talk about like limit breaks in some way. We want to talk about F-Zero in some way. We want to talk about CO powers because it's an RTS game, and that's like they literally call it superpowers and stuff in there, so that counts. And I just wanted to make sure we had a variety of genres in here. We had MVC3 X Factor, just that sort of like you could do it whenever you want, but only once.
That one was a elephant in the room that we had to address because like it's one of the most infamous like comeback mechanics in a fighting game.
So having a comeback mechanics section in here was going to be necessary to do. We knew we wanted to punch out Wii, just because it's a much simpler version of a fighting game.
Yeah, it's a very simpler, like risk reward, opportunity cost kind of thing.
We couldn't get away from Devil Trigger. We were gonna talk about Devil Trigger.
Like that's somewhere. The vanilla example right there. Like we could have gone into a bit deeper examples of like the subsets of Devil Trigger. I could have like talked about the details of like Sin Devil Trigger.
We knew, so every one of these episodes we almost always have, the bad example of stuff. We knew we wanted to talk about Jak 2 for a bad example.
Yeah, there were a few more details on that segment, but like it was a little awkward to include them, so it just got cut. Like there is some functionality to Jak 2. There's like a screen nuke ability, but like it's not particularly powerful, and it doesn't undo all the other problems. In fact, it kind of just emphasizes the problems with Dark Jak.
Yeah, we knew we wanted to talk about the Metroid Prime 3 corruption.
Like hyper mode. Hyper mode is definitely a dominant strategy where it does not feel like the game was particularly balanced, and like the dev team struggled with it. In interviews, they say that like, oh hey, we found a good balance for it. I don't think
that has panned out.
I don't think it panned out really in hindsight.
But anyway, we had all of these ideas in here, but we didn't have a through line. We were constantly being like, okay, we definitely need to talk about this, so write a paragraph about Metroid Prime 3. We definitely need to talk about Jak 2. Let's write a paragraph about Jak 2. And then we had all of these independent segments, and like this was probably like 2 to 3 weeks into making the episode, and we were just like, and we don't have any connective tissue hardly.
Yeah, nothing is flowing. Everything's an island.
Yeah, so this... And then we had to just work out what we were going to talk about.
Yeah, like having all the fighting games at the start was the biggest problem, and there were a whole bunch of ripple effects from that.
Yeah, because we wanted one of the bigger risks that I was thinking of for this episode was, hey, it's gonna look like this is only about fighting moves or fighting games.
Yeah, and one, we're not experts on fighting games, and two,
that's not what we're necessarily going to talk about all the way.
And if people think that, then it makes it more likely that they're not gonna
be
like
happy
watch
with the episode. Yeah. But so it's like, okay, our original idea of stick all the fighting game things as like vanilla examples at the beginning, that probably doesn't work. So we had to come up with a new dividing line between everything. We were gonna maybe do like building the meter versus like how you build the meter, like divide up, like do you build the meter by like attacking stuff, do you build the meter by getting attacked, do you build it by just time? Like some of that stuff is still present in the final version of the script, but that was kind of going to be the big the structural element of the whole thing for a while.
Like there was like a category, do you just wait for it, and like Mario Tennis was in there. Smash Bros was kind of in there.
Yeah. So this, every time we I think we came up with like 2 other ones and like sort of half-baked structural sequencing ideas sort of. And every time we came up with one, we would start rearranging all the existing segments around.
Like I know one of the more recent episodes had a lot of rearranging, but this one might have had the most.
Yeah, or it's just like, okay, you got to rearrange this. Now we got to rewrite these segues and re-time all the segues and the clips involved with them, because we're emphasizing different things now about what we're about to talk about. It's like, okay, this isn't the first one of this, of the intro for this segment isn't here. It's before. You know, there's a lot more rework on this episode than most.
Yeah, what comes to mind for me, this has probably been the most difficult episode to nail down since like Unlockables. There might have been a couple others that we've complained about.
This felt a lot like Unlockables, where it was just like, it just felt like the whole thing was dragging on so long, and it's like, I think part of it is like, it kind of feels like too big of a topic for one episode.
Yeah.
Which is Unlockables is super long. This was even longer. This is the longest non-Mario Kart episode we've ever done. And it just feels like, there's so much to talk about in Super Moves. Like we're not thorough about it. There's plenty more to talk about.
We could have gone into greater detail. We could have gone into like the economics of like Super Meter. We could have gone more into mind game stuff.
Yeah.
We could have gone into subsystems that are effectively super meters. I mean, we do with like X Factor and stuff.
But you could go way deeper than we do. But it's like, you can't just not have an episode out for 2 months. Like it's not going to be worth it to not have an episode for like 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something, to have something that's somewhat more detailed and like 50 minutes long or something.
Yeah, if you wait too long, then like the algorithm doesn't play nice with you.
Well, it just doesn't pay you back, the 2x what you would, if you put double the work in, you need double the payback for it.
Yeah, that's one of the more frustrating things about YouTube, is that the longer you take, the harder it is to get back in gear.
Yeah,
sometimes.
well,
not always, but
I'm just thinking more it'd be like, hey, this episode did as well as all the other ones, and it took twice as long. Whoops. You
yeah,
could have instead spent that time on 2 episodes, and probably more people would have been happier that way. Now, it does work if you like do a super in-depth thing and it turns out that's the definitive answer about an interesting question. Whereas like I think our the Mario Kart Tracks episode is kind of that, whereas like we went all the way on it and it kind of became a larger thing than normal.
I cannot believe how fast that episode was made. Like it was super straightforward as far as topics go, but considering just the length of that whole thing.
Yeah. But we had to cut it somewhere, and like it's also like when you struggle to make an episode, like if the pieces aren't clicking right and they haven't been for a couple weeks, it's very demoralizing for like continuing work on this. It feels like you're just lost in the woods and you're never gonna find your way out.
Yeah.
So being able to ship something and move on is also good, even if it's if you give a B- effort on something, that is better than still being lost in the woods.
Coincidentally, today the Mario Kart Wave 6
there's more tracks now.
The Wave 6 tracks have been announced. So here comes the Mario Kart Tracks 2 episode. I don't know.
That?
I don't know if we're gonna do that.
We have discussed that.
That's
probably worth doing, but that might be
I'm leaning towards no, but I could be convinced.
Yeah. So we had all of these segments as like, and that's the other frustrating thing is like we have all these segments we know we want to talk about. We're not like, it's not hard to put together because we don't know if these things are going to be in the final episode. It's like they're going to be there. They all ended up in the final episode.
Yeah, most of them.
It's just the sticking them together in a way that's like
cohesive.
And is it because it doesn't count as good cohesion if you're just like, now let's talk about Jak 2. Now let's talk about Smash Brothers.
Yeah, no, like all the early drafts that you're looking through is like just whiplash.
Yeah, just like grinding every gear in order to get to the next thing. It's like that doesn't flow at all.
Yeah, it's like here's fighting games. Now here's Punch Out. Now here's Jak 2, I guess.
Yeah, it's like that isn't working.
Like nothing is flowing, and that's the difficult part of doing a lot of these episodes, making sure things flow together. Like the thing that we end up redoing the most across the board are segues.
Yeah.
We redo segues all the time. I don't think there's been an episode where we haven't redone a segue.
Yeah, it is a lot easier to be like, okay, we know. So that's the double-edged sword of it. It's like we can have a topic idea and then we'll know it's like if we're going to do this topic, we absolutely have to talk about this game as it relates to this topic because that's its thing. Whereas like we couldn't do a Super Moves episode and not talk about fighting games or not talk about Devil Trigger. Like that wouldn't make any sense. Well, maybe you could get away with Devil Trigger if you were going to do just a fighting games episode.
Yeah. There is like one segment that people have pointed out in the comments that we didn't do. Like we didn't do anything on Pokemon, and like part of that is like I don't really want to talk about Pokemon.
It's I don't know that we would add anything to the conversation.
Yeah, I mean there's a whole bunch of different like transformation supers that get added to each generation.
Yeah, but someone was commenting like, "Hey, you didn't talk about Pokemon at all." It's like, well, we didn't mention Pokemon at all. So yeah. I don't know that you would expect, like, we're not exhaustive. We can't be exhaustive.
Otherwise, the video will never come out.
Yeah, you can't talk about every game's super move. That doesn't make any sense. So you got to cut it somewhere, and on the other side of that line is going to be a lot of famous things too.
Yeah, and also just side note, Pokemon's one of the more annoying things to get footage for.
Yeah, I mean, we've got probably 15 plus games, at least 15 games that we actually talk about in some detail,
in depth, and then probably another like 10 to 15 that we just have in the B-roll that make a point in of themselves.
Yeah, but in the scope of things, like 15 games is nothing. Like that is absolutely nothing like even like the most famous games that have great examples to talk about. You can't do all of them in 15.
We can't talk about every single fighting game.
Yeah, there is no possible way to do that and make an episode that, like, even if you wanted to be like, this is going to be the comprehensive episode about this, it would be 8 hours long and still not cover everything that you wanted to talk about.
And then a week also passes, a bunch of new examples show up.
Most people would not be interested in sitting through that whole thing, and so your video just sits there. It's like you got to balance what most people want to watch and to try to be thorough on the topic.
Yeah,
and that is impossible, and you got to cut something that you wish you didn't cut.
Yeah.
So there's something you got to do that.
And also, it's like you will forget things. Things will just get left behind. That's part of like
the preview post thing that we do.
Yeah,
it's a sanity check.
It's a slight check, and often we're fine. Yeah. We might add one small thing here and there.
Yeah.
This one we probably added like 2, maybe even 3.
3 kind of major things.
Yeah.
Like, we didn't talk about this or this yet. We got to do that.
Yeah, and that delayed the episode like another 3 days, I would say.
Most of the other, that was probably the thing that made it take into, like, putting up the preview post and seeing, like, there's, like, 4 things that we definitely forgot to talk about or thought we maybe could get away with not talking about.
I would say more could get away with not talking about it, but... Yeah, no, it's like I definitely thought about those other like systems.
Yeah.
But
then seeing it immediately pop up on the preview post, like people expecting it almost, I was like, okay, I guess we can't get away with that.
They are a higher priority.
That was the difference between releasing on Friday and releasing on Monday.
Yeah. It's always a little awkward to do that, but ultimately no one really comments on it, so I don't think that many people care that much.
It's better for the extra time it took, and it would keep being a little bit better the more if we had delayed it till the next Friday, it would be a little bit better than it was as it was.
I'd be very tired.
But it is unpleasant to keep doing that forever.
You cannot be a completionist on these kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, you can on certain topics, but most of the topics that we end up talking about, you can't be a completionist about. Yeah, because they're just tropes and in common categories.
Can't be a completionist. Can't be a perfectionist.
Yeah. So, but now you've got an episode out, and now we can move on to a different episode.
Yeah. The other difficult thing about this one was figuring out the thumbnail.
Yeah. So this, it also goes back to that idea that, hey, we want to make sure that people don't think it's just about fighting games, because the phrase super moves is mostly a fighting game concept.
And unfortunately,
written,
most of the iconography comes from fighting games. Like, there's not that many great transformation supers that would work well and be relevant.
Look iconic. Like Jak 2, the bar that fills up is not iconic in any way.
Yeah, no. Like someone said, why didn't you talk about Supersonic? Like, that's not really a super move or anything like that.
It's kind of it's a transformation, so that works, but the iconography of it doesn't.
Well, the iconography might have worked, but
in our style.
But like the super element, it's more of an Easter egg / bonus rather than a core super mechanic that the game is designed around.
Yeah. So we were like, okay, we probably want to do like a Hadouken or something from Street Fighter, just as it's pretty iconic. So we do that, and then maybe add in like another character on the like getting blasted or something.
But the composition was not gonna work with that. We needed the Hadouken to be distinct visually.
Yeah,
and
it looks good. Like it looks good as a singular like character doing a thing. And then we put it up, and then the click-through rate was not amazing as it was.
Yeah, I know, like, if, we could try it again, like, switch back to it maybe, but...
Let's see if anything happens. But I get the sense that it having the single character there and it being about fighting games, which is... if you don't like fighting games, it's very easy to ignore a video that looks like it's about fighting games entirely.
So we may be dealing with that as an issue for this video. to some degree.
But that is also why we changed the thumbnail to include a bunch of meters of non-fighting games to try to suggest that the video is not just about Street Fighter super moves.
Yeah, that might not be obvious enough, but
yeah, it is. There's a certain like NASCAR car full of ads quality to it with the way it's laid out right now for some reason. That might just be me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's not just you. I mean, I think part of it is like the drive gauge kind of looks like a NASCAR like sticker.
It does say drive.
Yeah.
So it also has 0 meter. I don't know.
We tried a white version of the drive meter, and it like the contrast is not right.
Yeah.
All the assets are like simplified from their like sources, obviously, but like it's just one of those things where you kind of just have to like come to a compromise on some of that stuff.
Yeah.
If you want to stand out visually.
I guess the final structure we ended up going with is kind of big categories and types of supers, and then specific levers that a dev can pull to try to balance it. So we ended up with like your basic super meters, Hyrule Warriors, just kind of like setting the table of like why you would have super moves. It's like, oh, you want to set up sort of a build up and release to kind of a cathartic kind of pace breaking kind of thing.
Yeah, putting things in a bitter little ball and releasing it at the appropriate time.
I'm shoving in more and more obscure Simpsons references. As much
There's
as
also
possible.
another obscure reference that a bunch of people were catching on to.
The real ultimate power thing.
Yeah, no, I have no idea. I have no idea.
That's
of that.
from like Something Awful forums and like 04
yeah,
kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, like when people are like, "Wow, I'm surprised you guys do about that."
Yeah,
like,
it's me.
I'm like, it's like Mike's just making me say these things. I don't know, guys.
I don't even know what it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, I know it's an old like essay, Something Awful forum thing. I think it's unproblematic as it is. I don't think it aged extremely poorly or anything, but
I don't know.
I don't know the history. There's problems with most of that stuff, but such is life.
Yeah.
So we had Splatoon as kind of a hey, dial in what kind of super you want,
or like go more into like the meter building. We didn't go into details about like the little perk system where you could like make your super meter go faster, like build faster, or like you could reduce the amount you lose upon dying. But that was just one of those details that just like, okay, we need to get a move on. We can't just go into everything.
Yeah, every one of these is like you gotta painting in broad strokes, and it's like, well, I could add a little bit of detail here, and it's like, well, do you want the one thing to be very detailed and then everything else is like,
yeah, it doesn't really change the core argument,
generic.
And like people will bring it up in discussion anyway, so it's fine.
The more tangents you go down, the longer this episode is going to take to come out.
Yeah, but people don't like the exposition fairy.
Splatoon meter building. And then, so next category, once we started trying to dive more into considerations for a super meter system, we started being like risk and reward. We used Punch Out as a thing. It's like the super basic version of risk and reward is like, do you want to try to cash out right now, or do you want to try to push your luck and go for the big payoff at the end? If you get like 3 stars, you can win straight up.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of risk and reward is inherent to like almost every super meter to some degree.
Yeah, so like it's super common in every fighting game. Basically.
Like if you F099, if you max out your Skyway meter, you can't use your normal boosts. So it's like, okay, when are you gonna do it? Because the longer you hold on to this, the less opportunities you have to use your boost to gain even more speed and make up more ground.
The reason it's in here with Punch Out is because Punch Out is easy to explain what's going on.
Yeah.
In that every other fighting game is like, well, if you know that this thing takes 3 frames to leave you here, and then you have this exact window to open up and do, like, that's all true. that's way hard. You had to explain a lot of other concepts earlier to get to that part. Whereas in Punch Out, it's just like, hey, there's a window here where his animation is a very visual thing to be like, his animation is clearly setting you up to punch in this manner at this time. And then you get a big like cutscene basically of you winning, that kind of stuff.
And then sometimes there's also like, oh, hey, what if the super meter resource shares like multiple functions? Like sometimes a super move might not be the thing you want. Like Mortal Kombat 9 is a game that ran into that issue, where like your bar would be used for like EX moves, like your better specials. And if you filled it all the way, you could do like a super move, X-ray move. But the thing is, no one used it because it was more cost effective to use it on your EXs.
Yeah,
essentially.
So it's the idea of like, hey, these super moves can be not good enough to keep using. Kind of gets the Soul Calibur 2 section, which is the next one on this list. We had a hard time placing it necessarily because we knew we wanted to talk about the idea of, okay, what if we break the system entirely and you can just use no meter, you can use a super whenever you want. How do you make that not totally broken?
Yeah, I remember like kind of arguing with you about like whether or not the like unblockables like were close enough to count.
Yeah, I mean, they take off a huge chunk of stuff, and there's no equivalent super system in the game.
Yeah, and they have a unifying like particle effect to identify them with the flame charge effect.
And so to try to balance that thing, those are very flashy and very telegraphed as to what's about to happen. So any experienced player can just dodge it very easily. Then inexperienced players are going to get freaking destroyed.
Yeah. They tend to not be the more used options. Because you have other moves that can do what they do as well.
It's easy to counter. It's like in chess, if you've got like, the Scholar's Mate or something, where it's like, hey, there's this 4-move checkmate. And, oh my god, that's so powerful. And then it's like, yeah, but you just do this, and then you're way ahead. It's easy to block, and then the person that blocked it is now way ahead. So once you start getting above the point where people know how to block it, no one even tries to do it anymore.
Yeah, when you know the strat and you know the counter.
Yeah, like if you can assume that the other person knows the counter for the gimmick thing you're about to do, then you just stop seeing the gimmick thing used at all. And so that kind of causes the Soul Calibur 2 super like unblockable stuff to be heavily underused.
Yeah, except for like specific ones that are just very good moves in general,
or specific setups or something.
Yeah,
but
I mean, in the end, that's what a lot of supers are anyway. But like, they're more deliberately designed around like being a combo ender.
It is also sort of highlighting a failure state of a super move system that is not. It became too powerful and it was the only thing that matters. That's a failure state. But the other one of it's not powerful enough, it's not worth doing at all. Like Soul Calibur 2 is highlighting that idea.
Yeah. And of course there's always like so many other factors that can affect a super move's viability. Like does a character have moves that support going into the super?
Yeah.
How effective are their setups? How good is the super itself?
Yeah.
And all those things just like vary on a case by case basis. That like, I mean, fighting game devs are constantly working around
that. Yeah. The next one. So we were talking about super meters and things pretty close to super meters this whole time so far. And then now we're like, okay, there's this other big category that's like transformations, where it's like your super is you've got your normal moveset and you punch harder, or you've got a totally new moveset and for a time you're doing that moveset instead.
Yeah. In fighting games, this is referred to as like installs. Supers.
Yeah.
We originally had a draft with that in there, but like it just got dropped.
Yeah.
Some people pointed out, I can't believe you didn't mention install supers. Like it's the same as transformations.
Yeah. So this is getting to the idea of people coming in thinking it was gonna just be about fighting game stuff the whole time, and that kind of panned out. I think it would have been a lot worse if we had not done a couple other things to like suggest that we weren't going to talk about fighting games the whole time, but you can see it still bleed through a little bit.
A little bit.
But that's not a huge deal. But like, here's where we talk about Devil Trigger. That's just like, hey, you're faster now. You build up the meter, fire it off, and you're faster and your moves hit harder. And you got some exclusive moves that you can now do for a time until it runs out. And that's the balancing factors. Like, how long do you have it go until it runs out?
Yeah. And then you have Kingdom Hearts 2 with Anti-Form, where as you use most of your drive forms, except for like the extra final one, you build up the chance of activating Anti-Form.
Yeah, so that chance is a unique balancing mechanic in here, where it's like your form, what if it is a bad form? What if it sucks to be it?
Yeah, what if it's more detrimental? It's like, you can work around Anti-Form fine, like you can make it work, and there are ways to work around it, and eventually, by random chance, you will get a form that will negate how often it shows up. But by the time you get that form, which is called Final Form, you're not getting that until like end game.
Yeah.
So like, again, some people were pointing that out.
The dot hack section happens right after Kingdom Hearts 2, and that's largely because it's kind of a related risk thing with taking the chance of getting just a straight up game over, like the extreme version of like
a straight up game over, or
a game over, I guess,
or some sort of detrimental thing. Like sometimes it'll cast like status effects on you.
It is kind of a transformation in the sense of like, hey, your opponents are now a lot weaker. It's not you are stronger.
You are reducing the boss or opponent.
Yeah, so it's like kind of in effect making your moves like 100 times stronger.
It's more of a standard super move, but yeah.
Yeah. It's just related. It's hard. I mean, that's part of why it's such a short segment. Is it fits in kinda, but not super clean.
We had a longer segment for that, and I think we intended to re-add some of that stuff, but it just didn't happen.
Yeah, we cut some of that just to make it not long-winded, and then maybe we cut a lot of it. But whatever.
I did have to like play about 3-4 hours of dot hack.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, dot hack I had a lot of nostalgia for, but I remember getting about halfway through dot hack Infection. That game is a 4-disc RPG that was split into 4 separate games.
Oh yeah,
and
explicitly,
nothing happens in that first game. Nothing happens.
Yeah,
aside from establishing the basics.
That's why I stopped. I didn't get 2, 3, or 4.
Yeah, I hear GU is good.
One was bad,
but
yeah, people like that. People don't especially like the first handful of those games.
I have a lot of nostalgia for it, but it ain't good.
Oh, I had a line in here about it's an isekai before everything was an isekai. That ended up getting cut.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if that's actually the case.
It is an isekai.
Kinda.
I think that counts.
I don't think Kite is trapped in there, or at least not at first.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's like you're trapped in there if you get like mind virused or whatever.
Kinda.
I've forgotten what the plot is exactly.
I don't know, some white girl gives you a book and it's like, I don't know.
You die in the game. You die for real. Kinda.
I guess. I don't know.
Sorta. Anyway.
There's a guy named Pyros who talks about your eyes a whole lot. I don't like that guy.
Final Fantasy IX and Dragon Quest XI kind of came in as a package. And that's that got bumped around a whole lot all over the script.
Yeah, like that one is kind of the ultimate case of like not being able to manually trigger your super is annoying.
Yeah, that was a late entry into this transformation section because I was like, okay, this is a transformation. We can't just have it later in the episode.
Trance is a transformation.
Yeah. Dragon Quest
has elements of it, but it's more of a standard limit break.
Yeah, just filling up the gauge and now you hit harder, and then not being able to trance specifically, really not being able to strategize around it. Like DQ11, you've got more options to.
You have a lot more options with DQ11. You can swap out party members. You can hold on to that stuff for a while, so you can do stuff with it. It's just more awkward than you want it to be because Dragon Quest VIII had a similar system, but you had more control.
DQ11 is essentially we refined the trance system to be more sensibly used as a strategic tool rather than just a kind of a bonus you get sometimes.
Yeah. It's better, but it's still not great.
Yeah.
Not my favorite implementation of that kind of stuff.
Then we switch it over to talking about sort of the cost of power, like trying to make costly decisions to open up some kind of superpower, like super mode kind of thing. This is where Metroid Prime 3 lives.
And it's just not enough cost. Like they put in a bunch of risks in there, but they're really negligible.
They're pretty easy to get around, and also you are invincible when you're in the form.
More or less. It's like you could die if you're really careless, but you
probably won't.
You're gonna be fine. And
you'll reach, if you don't game over, you'll recharge.
You'll be fine.
All the stuff that you paid out. So it's really not that.
I don't know if it like changes with the harder difficulties, but I think you unlock those after you beat the game, so I don't know.
Yeah. The cooldown section was the final thing we added.
Yeah, that one was one of those things that had been floating around for a while.
We can't not talk about a super system where the balancing feature is a straight up timer that doesn't let you do it as much as you want. But it does let you do it sometimes, and if you just hit this button, you get to fire off a cool move, no matter how bad you're doing in the game.
So yeah, a bunch of B-roll of FF16, which has like kind of ultimate style supers. Everything's on the cooldown.
Yeah,
like all FF14.
Yeah. Red Alert 2,
League of Legends.
Yeah, Red Alert 2 has the sort of, it's a cooldown timer, but it's visible to everybody. And it's, not in a MOBA context, so it's kind of a unique thing to do, so we wanted to mention that. After that was Mario Tennis, where it's kind of a cooldown timer.
Specifically on the Wii U.
That is the extreme other end of the Soul Calibur, like failure mode kind of thing, where Soul Calibur was like, it's too underpowered to use. Mario Tennis it's too overpowered to make the rest of the game fun.
Yeah.
Just because it's a dominant thing.
You have a very uphill battle if you're not the one with the power up.
Yeah,
it's like it's not that you can't not win, but like,
but also you won't have to, because you got your own power up that you can just immediately go back and get, because you almost immediately both get a chance at it.
It like that game is rushed for so many reasons.
Yeah, and also just inherently in tennis, the thing that bothers me maybe the most about it is the cutscene playing every single time it happens.
It's a bad interruption.
Like, tennis is very dependent on being able to track where the ball is, and changing the camera angle to do a cutscene you've seen 100 times already will screw with you. Yeah. Or if it doesn't, like, it pauses it to let you reorient it.
Yeah, normally when like a cutscene happens in the other Mario Tennis games, whether it's Power Tennis or Mario Tennis Aces, like if it's a cutscene play, it's because they're hitting the ball.
Yeah,
they're actively hitting the ball when it happens. It's like Mario Power Tennis, you had the defensive shots that save you. You had the offensive shots. Mm-hmm. And then with Aces, you had like the huge like spiking shot.
Yeah,
where you could like aim it.
Like Mario Tennis 64 is great, and then all the like little addition. Well, I guess Power Tennis is fine, but like,
I know people like Aces, but
yeah. It's
kind of like fighting game-esque.
Ultra Smash is definitely the worst.
No question. No one cares about Open. Yeah. If you remembered Open, I'm sorry.
Then sort of that segued into the disruptive super moves segment, which Kingdom Hearts 3 is in there, where it's like, hey, this is
disruptive.
Taking you. What did I say?
Destructive.
Oh, I thought it said disruptive. Where it's taking you out of the experience to try to wow you, but it's like, hey, if you've seen this cutscene already, it's not that great the 6th time you've seen the cutscene. I was gonna put in stuff about the FF7 summons in there that would have fit, because 8 does the thing of, hey, you can shorten up the timer or the time for the summons, because they realize that
I think FF7 has that to some degree, but
these cutscenes take forever to do.
Yeah, I thought about putting in the like Mario and Luigi like bro moves, or at least in the later games, but we talked about those in the past.
Yeah. And then we kind of get to the catch-up mechanic thing, where we talk about CO powers, which we've kind of talked about. The catch-up of, hey, if you're getting attacked, you're building the meter a lot faster.
Yeah, again, a lot of fighting games have this to some degree. Like every game is a little different with how like meter buildup is done, and like sometimes like depending on how that's handled, that can be the entire differentiator for some games.
Yeah, I mean this is where the X Factor UMVC3 stuff is also shows up a little bit later in this section.
Yeah.
Where the X Factor mechanic is stronger the more people are dead on your side. And if you get it at the max level, you like misstep, you can just immediately lose the match.
Yeah, it's super overtuned, especially with some characters. Characters like Virgil dominated the meta for so long.
Yeah. The F-Zero 99 Skyway thing, we definitely, like I said before, the F-Zero thing was the sort of gold star example for this entire thing of like, hey, this is a unique mechanic that works in a genre that doesn't normally have super moves.
It uses the form factor of 99 players very well with the spark system. Like the way you build meter is through these sparks, which happen because of player collisions.
Yeah.
So that means that the form factor of 99 racers at once, like bumping into each other, that has an actual effect.
Yeah, and then it tapers down the further and further you get in the game, and the skill part of it starts to outbalance the randomness and the like collisions factor.
I've played like 40 hours of F-Zero 99.
It's a lot of it. It's very good.
I think that's my like second game of the year.
And then to cap the whole thing off, we wanted to talk about Smash Bros. Just like do a spectacle thing, random chance. Maybe it doesn't have to all be about super balanced stuff.
Yeah, no, it's like Smash Brothers just wants to embrace the fun of it, and for the most part, it is pretty fun. But like generally, like you're not gonna see it in tournaments that often, or at least not main tournaments, maybe side tourneys.
Yeah, and for some of this is somewhat contradictory with the Mario Tennis stuff and the Kingdom Hearts stuff about, hey, it's kind of boring the 7th time you've seen this cutscene.
Yeah, but like how like the Mario Tennis thing could have also probably fit in Disruptive.
Yeah. I mean, I use that as that's why the segue was there, or the connect. That's why the Kingdom Hearts 3 thing is located there, is because it's right after the Mario Tennis thing. So anyway, we got it out the door.
We got it out the door. Oh my god, that was like one of the most exhausting episodes to work on.
Yeah. Next one we're doing is another boss one.
Yep, gonna be going back to a topic that we did in the past, but before we actually did boss episodes.
Yeah, so we're doing rival bosses.
Yeah, we're gonna properly do it this time because I think we've gotten a lot better since the last time we did in like 2018, 2017.
Yeah, do the I think that thing we only talked about like 4 of them. I don't think we're gonna talk about those examples at all.
We might have to talk about Devil May Cry, but yeah, man, true. we won't focus on it just because we talked about so much Devil May Cry in the last few episodes.
That is true.
It is. I might have to go and grab Bayonetta or something.
It just so happens that it has really good super moves. It has a really good rival.
I mean, it's the standard for like hack and slash character action.
Yeah. So we can't get away from it.
Can't get away from it. So, I feel kind of weird talking about it so much in the last like 5 episodes.
Normally I'm like, hey, I'm usually the one to be like, okay, we're cutting this because we've talked about this 3 times in the last 4. But I'm like, we can't not talk about Virgil. Come on.
I'm able to not talk about Pokemon, but just because I'm kind of tired of it. Oh, there might be a Pokemon example from like Scarlet and Violet.
We'll have B-roll at the very least.
Yeah, we'll see.
But
didn't have B-roll for this one.
That's the well, I don't know. This thing seems like it shouldn't take nearly as long.
That's the hope. Who knows?
We've set a hard release date of Cyber Monday, which is the Monday. It's the Monday after Thanksgiving, so I think that's the 27th. We don't normally have like super hard set dates, but for this one we do. But I mean, we've got like 4 weeks to deal with it, so it should be pretty
straightforward.
Doable. Yeah. And then we'll get another episode out in December, like decently before Christmas, I think. So we might be done with this before, like a decent amount before we actually release this next episode. Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see what happens. Thanks, patrons, for your support, and we will catch you next time.
See you.